Are there persons here with us this evening that were not with us either Friday or this morning session? Okay. Just to give some background on what we're doing and the title itself. Yeah, something that I said I would do is provide for you a little video of Srila Prabhupada. Maybe you'll do it at the end. A video of Srila Prabhupada describing the seed of the Hare Krishna movement. Now, my understanding from the early days, we didn't call ourselves the Hare Krishna movement. The media called us the Hare Krishna movement. Because wherever they went, they saw devotees in the public chanting Hare Krishna. So they coined the phrase, the Hare Krishna movement. Because of our vigorous activity of chanting Hare Krishna publicly. So Prabhupada describes this is how the Hare Krishna movement began. You'll see this little video. Remind me if I forget. I don't think I'll forget. It's short, but very powerful. It's short and sweet, too. So we're all products of that. We're part of the Hare Krishna movement, which means, in our terms, it's practitioners of Bhakti Yoga, and specifically followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who gave the chanting of the holy name, the Yuga Dharma, principal means of achieving the goal of life, identifying what the goal of life is and giving us the means to achieve it. And through the teachings of Rupa Goswami, he expanded those teachings through his writings. He invested him with spiritual potency. There's an interesting passage in Chaitanya Charitamrita where...
You want the mic a little bit closer to you?
No, no. It's got an echo in it, and if I put it closer to me, it's going to echo some more. There's a sound system. Oh, you hear it.
Turn off the reverb.
Okay.
No need. It's not part of it.
They need me to speak so they can see how they're doing with it. So, reverb.
Yeah.
Anyway. Sound system and ISKCON Phoenix is like water and oil. They don't mix. Okay, so I'll keep going like as if everything is as it should be and pretend that it is as it should be. So, what was I saying anyways? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invested spiritual potency, thank you. When he left Jagannath Puri, some of you have read Chaitanya Charitamrita or have heard it. When he left Jagannath Puri, to travel to South India to visit the holy places of South India. He went with the purpose, external excuse of looking for his brother. Vishwarup, his elder brother, had taken sannyas when he was the younger brother, and he was looking for him. So with the much regret, the devotees in Puri had become attached to him. He left with one assistant. And as he was traveling, what was he doing? He was distributing the holy name. More specifically, he was distributing love of God through the agency of the holy name. And as he traveled, walking alone with his assistant, his arms raised, dancing, as we see that so many wonderful paintings of Lord Chaitanya on a path with his arms raised, dancing in ecstasy with tears coming from his eyes. And not only the Hare Krishna mantra, but Hari Haraya, Nama Krishna, Yadavaya, Madhav. So, and Krishna Krishna, Krishna Krishna. We have these Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hey. We have these different names of Krishna that he was saying. And when people saw him, they had never seen anything like this before. Here's this effulgent sannyasi, personality of Godhead, dancing in ecstatic love for Krishna. So they came, and just seeing him in this state of ecstasy, they began chanting. And Lord Chaitanya, seeing them begin chanting, he came and embraced them. And their body erupted with spiritual ecstasy of love of Godhead. Just like. And they wanted to travel with him. Who would want to leave such a personality? And he then instructed them, no, go back to your village, and just as you have heard and seen and received, you give to others. Transcendental downline marketing. And he invested them with spiritual potency to do that. And the commentary says this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur, says that spiritual potency is two things. Ananda and samvit potency. Ecstasy and full cognizance equals the spiritual potency that he invested these individuals with. And these are just people on the street, on a path in South India. What to speak of Rupa Goswami, who he invested the fullness of his spiritual empowerment. That's a lot. Most people, the circuit breaker would pop. But he had great capacity. And Lord Chaitanya said that specifically. I saw in him the qualities, the character, that he was a fit recipient. So I invested in him the fullness of my spiritual potency. And so he wrote literatures, and we're focusing on one of them that we'll see the translation in just a moment. Awakening of Nama Rasa, because within the name is rasa. The fullness, as full as Krishna is of rasa, the name is full with rasa. And when that name starts to awaken within us, our experience of unique relationship with Krishna through the name, then the heart opens. And when the heart opens, then the experience of our relationship with Krishna through the medium of the holy name, or as the language we read this morning, we become capable of understanding who Krishna really is. And who are we? We're these little insignificant, not so qualified individuals, but we become benedicted with descending mercy. And here's another image showing this path of yoga. This is the yoga ladder, only as a stairway. And it brings us to our connection with Krishna. And it's through this very same medium of the congregational chanting of the holy name as we've been doing. And our theme verse is from Upadesha Amrita, or our nectar of instruction, that looks like this. During the midday, we spoke on this verse, particularly with the Adarad portion. We're going to continue this evening. So let us chant together. This is text 7 from Nectar of Instruction. Syat Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapya Vidya Pitopatapta Rasanasya Narochikano Intvadarad Adulinam Kalu Saiva Jushta Sadvi Kramad Bhavatitad Gudamula Hantri. Maybe by the time we're done, you'll have memorized the verse. That would be nice. Nice verse to memorize. The holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. So some of you know this, one of many verses in 2nd chapter of 1st canto, where knowledge and detachment causelessly arise when bhakti awakens. So bhakti is service with love for Krishna. Put simply, service with love for Krishna. Practical activity, engaging the senses and objects of the senses in the mood of love in service to Krishna. And the mind, madgatena antaratmana, the mind absorbed in him. Antar atma, absorbed in Krishna. So it's what the mind does and what the body does. That's bhakti. And when bhakti, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yad Ahaitukam. Jnanam Cha Yad Ahaitukam. Causelessly, knowledge awakens as consciousness awakens. We heard at the end of this midday discussion, Prabhupada writing to a disciple in 1967, that consciousness of Krishna is not something new, it's something that simply needs to be awakened. And that consciousness of Krishna is awakened through the name, starting with. That's what this one is. Nama, Charita, Adi. So the name and character, Adi, it's, it's beginning with, so etc. So it begins with the name. It begins with the name. There's some persons, not so uncommon, they like service. They are not so inclined to put their hand in a bead bag and chant. Other persons, they're not so inclined to put their hand in a bead bag, but they like to come to the kirtan. But many, many people, they like service. They're happy. Not sadhakas, but they like some service to Krishna. So they come to the temple. They can do it in their home too, but they also like coming to the temple and do some service for Krishna. And that's a practical activity, but the consciousness of Krishna is awakened through sound. So such persons, they come to the kitchen and they're cutting vegetables and they're hearing kirtan or Prabhupada lecture, or they're hearing sound. And that sound helps awaken the Krishna consciousness. So the mind goes there. And when that awakening of Krishna consciousness takes place, then knowledge and detachment causelessly follow. That's how the process works. It's a science. It's very predictable and repeatable. It helps if one is attentive. And it helps if one has faith. Now, a faithless person, that's a hard candidate to soften their heart. But even persons that don't know, as I was sharing the first evening, yesterday evening, in China, people, they've never chanted. They've never anything. They've never heard talks about God because it's China. It's just like you don't hear. Doesn't mean they don't have something inside, but they've never heard. And when they hear, something moves. And they feel something they've never felt before. And they tears and trembling, and they want to know, what was that? It's there to be awakened. It's dormant, and sound vibration awakens, and when that awakens, knowledge and detachment follow. And of course, a desire to be in service to Krishna, especially the service of hearing and chanting it's a sign of one is progressing. Detachment from other things and attraction for hearing and chanting. So this is an image taken directly from Sachinandana Swami, who way down here in Phoenix, probably not too many members go to attend his recent, on Mother's Day weekend, they've had this festival of inspiration, and so they decided to modify it a little bit, invite Sachinanda Swami, because attendance was waning a little bit, so they brought Sachinanda Swami, and he gave a seminar on chanting, and attendance went way up. So this is taken from what he sent out to the people who attended, and it's waves. That's the waves of the Ananda Ambudi, the ocean of Ananda, and the waves are marked by the Mahamantra. It's one of his artists. And in this presentation in New Vrindavan, he spoke about this carefully chanting topic, not in the same way that I am, but I'm making reference to it, and we'll touch on some of them. He indicates in this PDF that he sent out to those who attended, there are 5 things that anybody who wants to go more deeply into chanting, and he's really a good spokesperson for this go more deeply in chanting topic because of all the effort that he's put together with Burijan Prabhu and just what we're doing now, so I'm making reference. Yojana is the Sanskrit term that he uses. The English language is alignment, and they have similar Sanskrit roots, yoga and yojana, and at least his determination is yojana is the best word for alignment of body, mind, and heart. So if there's time at the end, we may make a distinction, because he does, between mind and heart. Like, what's the difference between mind and heart? In some sense, they're used interchangeably, but there's something of a distinction. So alignment, anyways. And chanting with a sense of relationship. Sambandha is relationship, and establishing one's relationship, understanding the relationship of all things like myself and all of what I consider to be mine, my stuff. It has its relationship with Krishna. He's the proprietor. So the sense of relationship with the name, we were speaking about service to the name. That's a relationship. Dasya. And from that, other varieties of servitude, friendship, parental affection, conjugal love, that's also a service. Seva, in the mood of service specifically. Vipralamba, chanting in the right mood. And Sharanagati. It's Atmanivedana is actually what he's put here, surrendering the very self to the Lord. But that's one of the limbs of surrender, one of the 6. Giving oneself in fullness to the Supreme Lord. So he expands on this in this little PDF, and these 5 were covered during his seminar in New Vrindavan. So I'm just sharing with you. We're going to be focusing specifically on chanting in the right mood, or actually a couple of them. Chanting in the sense of relationship. Carefully chanting. Those of you that came on Friday evening were fortunate enough to get a printout of a little handout that I'm going to be making reference to as we go along. So if you didn't get one, please raise your hand. And someone please take note of who didn't get one, and we'll see if we can get you one. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Didn't get one. We'll see that you get one. We'll try to. For those of you that didn't get one, this reference that's on the screen here, this is Krishna speaking to Uddhava, Canto 11, Chapter 11, and it's printed in your handout where there's the verse and purport which I'm going to read. One who has executed sacrificial performances and pious works for my satisfaction, and thus who worships me with fixed attention, obtains unflinching devotional service unto me. By the excellent quality of his service, such a worshipper obtains realized knowledge of me. Now, in the beginning part of the purport, the explanation is given that the sacrifices and so forth, it's not karmakanda type. It's the perfection or culmination. Krishna is not advocating karmakanda. He's advocating sacrificial performance or pious works that are pure devotional service, in short. The highest sacrifice is to chant the holy names of the Lord. And by taking shelter of the Lord's names, one will acquire unflinching devotion and realize knowledge of the absolute truth. A realized devotee is very attentive in his devotional service, taking it as his life and soul. He keeps himself fit for devotional service by constantly worshiping and glorifying the lotus feet of the spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such Hari Nama Kirtan and Guru Puja are the only practical methods by which one can achieve pure devotional service. When Hari Kirtan is expanded, it is called Krishna Sankirtan. One should not dry up by performing unauthorized austerities or sacrifices. Rather, one should engage with all enthusiasm in the great sacrifice of Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which enables one to easily achieve the highest perfection of human life. This evening is an attempt to expand in different ways, not exhaustively, but carefully chanting. So carefully chanting, there's some elements here that indicate there must be some faith. And then with that faith, then dedication with faith in the activity. And specifically mentioned here also in the verse and purport is taking shelter of the person from whom one has received both the faith and the mantra. Those of you that are with us on Friday evening, you heard Badahari describe briefly the Gopakumar story from Brihat Bhagavatamrita, where Gopakumar receives mantra from his guru. He doesn't even know the name of the guru. He doesn't know the meaning of the mantra. He doesn't know lots of things, but he has faith in the guru and he has faith in what the gift that he has been given, although he doesn't really know exactly what it is and how to engage with it. But slowly, step by step, that's all revealed because of his dedication to his guru and the dedication to the gift given from his guru, the mantra. And gradually things become clear to him up to the point of returning to Goloka Vrindavan and reuniting with Krishna. So that's like a dream come true, but it's the power, the potency was in the name. And one who has faith, and specifically mentioned here, is this taking shelter of the spiritual master. Narada Muni did the same thing, Prahlad did the same thing. They felt great gratitude to Narada Muni for what they received, and that's very important for progressing in spiritual life. It's not only take, like a child take from mom and dad something, and they look at that thing that they took that's in their hand and they don't necessarily make the connection with the giver of the gift. But a more mature stage is not just to say thank you, but feel gratitude towards what one has received and the source that it has come from. That's a spiritual principle, or it's a maturing principle minimally. And for maturing in the chanting of the holy name, these two things are there. This process of hearing, pure sound vibration, and the mood of continuing service and worship of the source of that. So for us, we look to our founder Acharya, whoever the present generation of devotees are, and going over the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. Within ISKCON at least, that's core. Our primary Shiksha Guru is our founder Acharya. And nourishing that is a duty of all devotees from all positions for present generation and future generations. And that hearing process, like his books and kirtan and so many things, it's the gift that we have received. And when we receive that gift, we're not just our own effort to become self-realized or become free from suffering, like this verse from Rupa Goswami, we're delivered. And we're delivered by this wonderful process of chanting and the wonderful process of Sankirtan starts with our carefully hearing. Carefully hearing, this text is saying, includes recognizing that sound vibration that we're hearing is coming to us through disciplic succession. And the submission may be to our present link, but ultimately it's to the entire disciplic succession. Ultimately it's to Krishna. Krishna is the deliverer. The current link, Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru, they're certainly deliverers of, but the deliverer ultimately is Krishna. He's the deliverer of his devotees. And we get that connection with Krishna through sound, and the link to connect with that sound is essential to recognize, have regard for, and continue to renew that connection with Krishna through that link. So Prabhupada very generously, liberally gave the name and connected people to disciplic succession, as happened with him and previous generations from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down. And so we're continuing just being instruments to the best we can, instruments of that descending mercy. So back again to the theme topic of what does carefully chanting mean? We spent some time already, so I'm renewing that discussion on attention, and attentiveness is not literally one-to-one correlation, but very, very close, almost synonymous with carefully. We will tomorrow, we'll be chanting a good number of rounds. Many of us will be chanting 64 rounds. And as we're chanting, the distracted mind will do its thing, most likely. And when the mind becomes distracted, it then becomes necessary to bring the mind back. And we've suggested several ways. I'll repeat them, because part of, for those of you that were with us the first evening, I mentioned in this handout there's an exercise, so I'm repeating it purposefully. The exercise is during the time we're spending together, during Kirtan this evening, during the 64 round day tomorrow, and thereafter for the next 3 weeks, is a request at least, to cultivate or experiment with the mood of service to the name, understand the understanding that the name and the person are non-different. That's the sambandha, or relationship. Our relationship with Krishna is through our relationship with the name, in one sense, because we'll become acquainted with Krishna or reminded of our forgotten relationship with Krishna through the name, starting with the name. So if that's your intention, it will help your attention tomorrow, tonight, and thereafter. And we also, this is just a reminder, thematically, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was emphasizing hearing, because the ear can conquer the mind. The sound vibration, spiritual sound vibration, heard with proper attention, not with a material conception, a spiritual conception. So we're hearing things to help us get a spiritual conception of what the name is. That hearing can conquer the mind. So you'll see at the very end some language that will help you tomorrow when the mind starts to wander, and with emphasis upon hearing. Here's a nice devotee sitting peacefully, trying to give the mind to Krishna while chanting. I'm putting this in here because it has to do with the reverse. For those that, so Lord Macaulay, some of you probably know from your Indian history who this gentleman was. During the early 1800s, in the beginning era of the British occupancy, he was sent to examine all of India and what's the best way for the British to subjugate the Indian population. So he's making his report from his travels to the British Parliament. I don't know if somebody had a recorder or the stenographer or whatever it is. Maybe it's a paper he delivered, I don't know. I have traveled across the length and breadth of India, and I have not seen one person who is a beggar, I don't know where he was, who is a thief. Such wealth I have seen in this country, such high moral values, people of such caliber, that I do not think we would ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is her spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace her old and ancient education system, her culture. For if the Indians think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their native culture, and they will become what we want them, a truly dominated nation. And so it was. That was the strategy. So break the culture, the ancient education system, her culture. So the ancient education system is sound vibration from the Vedas to the people, to youth. And if we, Prabhupada gave us this mandate, cultural conquest, to bring life of devotion back to the Western culture, because it is long gone. He used the term cultural conquest, and it doesn't just mean teach the children Bharatanatyam dancing or Kathak music or something. It's something, it includes those things, but it's more fundamentally culture. Culture is how we view, how we value, how we live our lives, and how we hold ourselves in our dealings with one another, how we regard ourselves and conduct our lives. Spiritual culture. That spiritual culture can be strengthened through the name, but also through teachings. And very keen was Srila Prabhupada to establish Krishna consciousness all over the world, was this through his literature and through chanting. It's a perfect combination. The holy name and the sound vibration that directs how do we live our lives, where there is an awakened consciousness of Krishna or Krishna culture. Mention is made in the verse as well as the purport, keeping the lotus feet of the spiritual master and Krishna in one's heart. Now Krishna is already there, and he'll never leave. We may give our attention elsewhere, but Krishna doesn't leave. So that to keeping the lotus feet of Krishna in one's heart is a matter of consciousness, and to access that Krishna consciousness, it's the lotus feet of the spiritual master. So where there's darkness, you cannot see. Where there's light, you can see. So fortunately, the lotus feet of Krishna and the lotus feet of the spiritual master are luminous. They give light, so then we can see and feel the presence. There's a nice image of a deity with a lotus at his feet, and there's Srila Prabhupada at his feet, because that's where he is. At the foot of Krishna, you take shelter of the feet of Srila Prabhupada, and you're at the lotus feet of Krishna. Put the lotus feet of Krishna in your heart. And the rasa, the taste for Krishna, the attentiveness when chanting will become strengthened. another image that shows something quite similar. We're moving along the bhakti path, or specifically here in this case, we're all chanting. We want to go further with our chanting. See where this chanting has come from into our lives, and with gratitude in our hearts, chant with attention, because we want to receive the fullness of the gift that we have been given, just like Gopakumar. Some of you know, some of you may not know, one of the devotees that was involved, primary devotee that was involved in making these impressions of Prabhupada's lotus feet, like you find in front of Prabhupada's Vyasasan. There's a little story connected with that. I'll tell a little Prabhupada story. Kuladri Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple, he had responsibility in New Vrindavan. And so when going to visit Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan, he brought some ice cream from the cows in Vrindavan, New Vrindavan, and kept it in dry ice so he could feed Srila Prabhupada some New Vrindavan fresh, homemade ice cream. And Prabhupada liked it very much. And then he made a request. Prabhupada devotees want to worship your lotus feet. So some of our artisans in New Vrindavan, they have this method so we can make some impression of your lotus feet in this very soft clay. Would it be okay for us to do that? So Prabhupada agreed. Kuladri describes it so lovingly. He took the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, firmly placed them in this soft clay one by one, and his feet sank enough into the clay that an impression was made in the clay, and then Prabhupada's feet were lifted and washed, and then that became the mold. That's what you see on every Vyasasan in ISKCON. Very special service, yes? Touching the feet of Srila Prabhupada, memorializing the impression of the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada for all the generations to come of ISKCON followers. Very blessed opportunity. Very, very nice story. And he's an artist too, by the way. Did you know that? He has some fine art skills, but the only paintings I've seen that came from his artwork is portraits of Prabhupada, and they're exquisite. Very, very fine. He's a man of multiple talents, that some of which are hidden. But when bhakti is there, then Krishna gives abilities that one may not even know was there before. One devotee who was an artist said to Prabhupada one time, because he had requested him, could you be part of the art department, that was just like coming out of nothing, coming out of a desire. So they said yes. Then after some time, they said, Prabhupada, before you asked me to be part of the art department, I never had a paintbrush in my hand. Should I go take some art classes? This is after some time of being an artist. And Prabhupada said, that's not necessary. If you just do anything with devotion for Krishna, if you do anything with devotion for Krishna, he will then give you the ability to do that very nicely. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't get some training, because later that devotee and many other devotees went forward and did get some formal art training. But the essence is not the training, the essence is bhakti. Because someone can get training and not paint so wonderfully. But when you have bhakti, combined with some God-given gift, then wonderful things can happen. We heard a little bit earlier also, so we're revisiting the topic of enthusiasm, utsaha. We need to make some effort for carefully chanting. And an enthusiastic effort is the best effort. We heard Prabhupada's explanation of effort guided by intelligence is the essence of enthusiasm. So for real bhakti to manifest, there has to be some eagerness or some enthusiasm. Another little Prabhupada story over here on the right. In New York, there were several places that we went with Srila Prabhupada for morning walks, because as most of you know, it was a daily activity recommended by a medical doctor, because he had several heart attacks and they said you have to exercise. So it was from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every day, regardless of the weather. And one of the places we took Srila Prabhupada in New York was to Battery Park. And in Battery Park there's a little lake, and the particular time of the year. He had just been in London before coming to New York, and so when he saw the lake, he walked over and saw some ducks. And the ducks quickly came swimming over to where the devotees were standing. And Prabhupada looked around, does anyone have some prasadam? So somebody had something, and they held it up and they threw the prasadam, and the ducks caught the prasadam, or so it fell to the water, and then they scooped it up with their beaks. And then we're seeing that little scene and then walking some distance, and Prabhupada stopped and looked at us and said, "What lesson have we learned today?" And everyone looked at each other and looked at Prabhupada, and he said, "The duck that quacks the loudest gets the bread." He looked at us and went on. So, eagerness or enthusiasm. Now, Krishna's mercy is equal to every living entity, just like the sun shines equally everywhere. But receivers of the sunshine are going to be different depending upon the receptacle. So as receivers of Krishna and Krishna's mercy, how eager are we for that? And eagerness is very important, just like this other painting, little birds before they have their wings. They're completely dependent on mother and father bird. After some time, they get feathers and they can go and get their own. But when they don't have feathers and the mother or father bird come back with yummies like worms and insects and things in their beak, they stretch their necks so they can get whatever is the goodies from mother bird or father bird. We're similarly dependent. The reality is, we're not independent. And recognizing that in a mood of dependence, in a mood of, as we have been hearing, calling for the mercy of the name. Try it during kirtan. Try it during our 64-round day. Call for the mercy of the name with eagerness. If you start to get distracted, just do that. One of the japa retreats that I attended, I noticed one of the devotees every few minutes was going like this. And we were doing our, sharing exercise. It's in our schedule also. I asked them, when you were doing that, what did that mean? And they said, when I found myself getting distracted, I was thinking of the little bird or the little duckling that was eager for mercy. I was calling for the mercy of the holy name. Please attract my mind. Please attract my heart. Please attract me to you. That's like a little child reaching to their parent. They don't have, whatever the language, whatever the language is, this one is universal language. And it can be some other parent. It doesn't work. It's got to be mom or dad. And as soon as the child is in the hands of mom and dad, a screaming. I've had experience in airports. And other parents try to calm the child, but it doesn't work. But as soon as the child is in the arms of their mother or father, 5-10 seconds and it's over. Similarly, we're dependent and we need to. I don't advise, don't try calling out for mercy and see what happens. I'll advise, try it. Sincerely call for mercy from the name as the mind starts to become distracted, and see what happens. In this little handout document, there's this reference to 2.2.30 Bhagavatam, where it's Shukadeva Goswami answering the questions of Maharaj Parikshit, the beginning parts of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I picked this because it's a really long purport, and I'm not going to go through the really long purport, but it describes the offenses against the holy name, down towards the bottom of the second page. When we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one chant and hear the holy name of the Lord as Rama, Krishna, or the Mahamantra, but one should also read and hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, in the association of devotees. The primary practice of Bhakti Yoga will cause the seed already sowed in the heart to sprout, and by a regular watering process, as mentioned above, the Bhakti Yoga creeper will begin to grow. By systematic nurturing. By systematic nurturing. This is carefully chanting. Another way of saying carefully chanting. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent it will penetrate the coverings of the universe, as we've heard in the previous verses, reach the effulgent sky and go farther, etc. So this systematic nurturing, just like gardening or growing something from a seed, the seed is what we've received. We received the name. And some, again, Padhari put it so nicely, all of those who are attending are very special, very fortunate souls, because you not only received the seed of the name, but you want to nurture it further. That's why we're here. That's why we're here to be with you, because we're benefiting as well. And you're here to receive this systematic nurturing. Go further. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his talks with Haridas Thakur, discussed this very topic exhaustively in Harinam Chintamani. And in Harinam Chintamani, the systematic nurturing has this comparison of a creeper that grows, in, just as this second canto purport says, it pierces the covering of the universe, enters into the spiritual sky, takes shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna, and produces fruits and flowers made as an offering to Krishna's lotus feet. This text, Harinam Chintamani, was written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who has abundant writings, profuse writings on the process of chanting and developing and expanding the process of chanting. Again, a little sharing. Someone who I closely grew up with in Krishna consciousness was Rabindra Swarup Prabhu. Badahari certainly knows Rabindra Swarup Prabhu. We were initiated the same day in New York. He was a Philadelphia temple president. I was in New York Sankirtan leader, etc. But we've had some nice association over the years. And in ISKCON, he's one of our best, if not the best writer. He's really gifted. So he's now in his GBC emeritus status, and I knew what he wanted to do. He wanted to write. So not so long ago, I contacted him for something else and asked him, I know that you had so many writing projects, that you were just eager and hankering to write. Can you tell me what's your current writing project? And he immediately launched into this very eloquent description of the book that he's writing, and it's expanding on a book by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that explains how Shikshastaka, that Cheto Darpana Marjanam, that one, and Trinadapi Sunichena, and those are verses from Shikshastaka. He's writing a book on living that GPS system of getting to the lotus feet of Krishna in ecstatic love. His personal adventure and experiments with the Shikshastaka verses, taken from a writing of Bhakti. So he is a modern person that's taking what Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, which took what Lord Chaitanya did, and went very deeply with it. I'm really eager to read his book, amongst many other books I'd also like to read. It's just too busy doing things like this, spending time with nice devotees, conducting holy name workshops. But the hearing activity, the sound vibration activity, carefully chanting means you must be carefully hearing. And when you're carefully hearing, you're making a connection with our source, the source of everything, this sambandha, establishing our relationship with Krishna. This systematic nurturing has this example of gardening, same as is presented in the Gundicha Marjana pastime. Some of you are familiar. When Lord Chaitanya went with his associates to Gundicha, the place where Lord Jagannath goes after leaving the Jagannath temple, enters onto the Rath cart and is taken to Gundicha. Before he goes there, they cleanse the Gundicha temple. And there's beautiful description of their cleansing it once and then twice, and taking all the straws and sand and dust, making piles of it. And so it's expanded by Bhaktisiddhanta is this gardening metaphor. It's a good metaphor because there's a bhakti creeper that's like gardening. You want something to grow, you want the weeds to come out. Otherwise, the thing you want to grow won't grow. The weeds will grow quicker. They'll take all the nourishment, all the water, everything. So the weeds have to be removed. And the thing that you want has to be established. And almost finished here. I want to make one more reference. This is to Kapila Dev's teaching to Devahuti. There's bhakti that's described in chapter 28, and at the end of the description of, it's actually 27 and 28, pure devotional service. So Devahuti wants to know, bhakti is pure, but what if one's consciousness is not pure? Is it possible to engage in devotional service if your consciousness isn't pure? And then the answer is yes. Depending upon the modes of nature, you'll engage in mixed devotional service. And when he's describing the mixed devotee, that's the attachment to other things, the translation that Prabhupada has given is the separatist, where my interest and the interest of Krishna are separate. It's my consciousness is I'm not separate, but my consciousness is interest directed, separate from Krishna's interest. Prabhupada's words, one who sees his interest is separate from that of the Supreme Lord. And the phrases that are used in the mode of ignorance, in the mode of passion, bhina, drik, and pratak, bhava. Separatist is like, that's a non-complimentary word. It's a pejorative word. But those that have interests separate, it's an obstacle, say it softer. It's an obstacle in the path of bhakti. We have to align our interest with the interest of Krishna. Or Krishna is to be pleased. That's consciousness that's pure. So pleasing Krishna is everything. Tomorrow, I recommend that in the place where we're doing our 64 rounds, we have Tulsi Devi available, because Tulsi also is a deliverer of mercy, and especially for those who are seeking Namaprabhu's descending mercy, we can appeal to Tulsi Devi. Just as Haridas Thakur did his chanting before Tulsi Devi. So we're also encouraged in this way. If you feel distracted, you go to Tulsi and start offering Tulsi prayers. Or even if you're not feeling distracted, you offer prayers to Tulsi. She's a deliverer of mercy, specifically in terms of bhakti. The systematic nurturing message from this long purport 2230, carefully chanting and systematic nurturing are interwoven. Conclusion. You saw this image before. The exercise that's in your handout sheet, this is practice, repeating it purposefully, so it goes in the mood of service of the name, when chanting the name. That's a relationship. It's awakening of our dormant relationship with Krishna through the medium of sound of His holy name, which is not different than Him. And that attention will become stronger, and the goal will be more visible or palpable as you move along. There's a nice story in the back of our Bhagavad Gita. Almost all editions, even in other languages, they make reference to Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. I mentioned this in a college, and somebody, oh, Thoreau was one of my favorite poets. And I was surprised, because I didn't think people today even read poetry, what to speak of have their favorites. But Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his mature stage, he was living on a farm, a dairy farm, with his son, who was probably, mature adult with his own children. And at the end of the day, they were attempting to get the cows and the calves back in the barn. And there was a young heifer that decided they didn't want to go in the barn that day. And they had to get the heifer into the barn. So they were pushing the heifer. Heifer wasn't going. So they got a rope, put a rope around the neck of the heifer, and pulling on the rope and pushing from behind, and he was dug in. I'm not going in. So there was a worker lady that saw what they were struggling, these two men, and she smiled. She held up her finger, went to a bowl of salt, put her finger in the bowl of salt, held up her finger, went before the heifer, and held it before the heifer's tongue. The heifer saw the salt, his tongue went out. And she moved her finger a little bit. So he took a step. And her finger kept moving, and he went into the barn. And she smiled and held up her finger. Endeavor with intelligence is utsaha. So best is to have the mind become attracted rather than pushing. So how to get this taste for the holy name? Some cultivation is required. That's this carefully chanting message. So I'm looking at the clock and it's 6:15. So I think I'm going to end. There's a bit more, but I'm going to end. And see if there's any thoughts or discussion on this topic. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on the difference between mind and heart?
Yes, that's the part that I was going to skip. Okay, I'll go there. In conventional terms, mind and heart are often used almost interchangeably. Obviously, there's a difference because otherwise we wouldn't have two terms; we'd have one. But Sachinandan Swami, in this PDF that he hands out, this alignment of body, mind, and heart, he differentiates this way. To align the mind means we have thoughts of the past and the future. Focus on being present. That's alignment of the mind, or aligning the mind function. And when the mind goes away from that place, the being utterly present, you bring the mind back. That's alignment of the mind. And if the mind continues to wander, don't throw your hands up in the air and quit. Rather, you practice catching the mind and bringing the mind back, however many times it takes. That's a distinction, because thinking, feeling, willing, it's a function of the mind. He quotes from a morning walk in Hawaii. Srila Prabhupada reiterated the solution, the mind, in the following words. What is controlling of the mind? You have to chant and hear, that's all. You have to chant with your tongue and hear the sound, that's all. What is the question of the mind? And then as far as alignment of the heart, it's connect your feelings of the person whose name you're chanting to the name when chanting. Chant with devotional feelings. Now some people say, I don't have any devotional feelings. Well, to that I say, that's a devotional feeling. My dear Lord Krishna, take your feelings to Krishna. I'm absent, like you saw from this morning. I'm broken. I don't think I can be repaired. That's a feeling. They're feeling sad. I'm in this embarrassed condition of life. That's a feeling. And connect that feeling with Krishna. Heart alignment or attentive chanting really means chanting with attachment for the owner of the name.